Okay. I think we're good to go. The stream, I believe, is live, which is crazy. But we'll see. We'll wait. I think we're live. I think we're live. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the stream. It's been a while, actually, since we've done a live chat, and yeah, I think it was a month ago. Actually, I was looking up. We did one on episode Ignis and our reaction to it. Lauren is unfortunately in the other room. She's having to do some work, so she will not be joining me. You've got me all to yourself. Normally you would have Lauren doing her stream. Today you've got me. And I'm going to try my best to converse with you all for an hour. An hour, which is a very long period of time. But I'm going to try my best, as I said. Obviously, the more questions you can ask me, the more a discussion we have, the better this is going to be. So, yeah, do your best. Do your worst. As you can probably see from the video title, today we're going to be talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I was really tempted to have a massive discussion about Final Fantasy 15 stuff, and we can get onto that later if that's what you want to talk about, which I'm sure it is. But for now, I figured we'd have a conversation about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, because still we're in December now. It's December 2017. Yeah, sure, the PlayStation experience is next week, I think, but we haven't heard anything at all this year in terms of like progress, at least. The only real things we've had have been like small snippets of information from Nomura when he was attending kind of small conferences and just kind of blurted some stuff out. And then we had the huge update in the middle of the year when they talked about the fact they were taking development in-house. So I'm going to ask a really obvious question to start off with. I feel that most of you will answer how I'm expecting you to, but how are you guys feeling about the lack of news this year? Is it worrying you? Are you kind of quietly confident? And while everyone's answering that, I'm just going to say a blanket hello to everyone. There's a lot of people talking at the moment. I'm not used to I usually have Lauren here to help me with this. But yeah, welcome everyone who's joined the chat. I see a couple of names that are familiar to me. But yeah, how does everyone feel about the progress? Are you worried by the lack of information this year? And that's even without the fact that obviously as Kim Andre has said, do you think they scrapped a lot of the game when they moved it in house? Like that we don't know. We have absolutely no idea what the in-house move has done in terms of the progression of the game. Now, obviously, CyberConnect 2 were working on it for about 2 years, and I'd like to think that Square Enix were working reasonably close with them when they were working on it. So, from an optimistic side, I'd like to think that there are plenty of assets that they can reuse. It's more just a case of, I feel like the new staff that are going to be working on it have got to get up to speed with things and how things have been working. There could be some... I mean, from what we heard, CyberConnect 2 weren't really doing things from an artistic direction in terms of the way that Nomura wanted it to be done. So while there could be a lot of assets that they can reuse, again, maybe they have to scrap them and start them again because maybe they weren't up to scratch. Maybe they feel that the quality of what CyberConnect 2 are actually working on just isn't enough to repurpose, and they will have to start from scratch. And maybe that's why it's been so quiet this year. Legendary winner, you said there's news. It's confirmed for 2018. Really? Where is this news? Where? Yusuf, I think calling it another Versus 13 situation is maybe a little premature. Obviously, Versus 13 took 10 years. At the moment, the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 is on about a year and a half. Sorry, a year and a half? 2.5 years now. So it's still got quite a while to go before we get into a Versus 13 situation. I mean, typically, if you're thinking about game development life cycles, you are looking at anything from 2 to 4 years. So we're still well within that. And if they do release it in 2019, then or 2018 even, then that's not too outside of what we would be expecting from a development cycle. I think the issue that we've always seen with Square Enix is that they announce games before they have anything to actually show on them. They want to get people excited about things before they've even started developing. I was even reading, with Final Fantasy 13 when they announced Fabula Nova Crystallis, pretty much the Final Fantasy 13 Versus 13 and Agito 13, they hadn't done anything on any of them. They had some concept stuff, and they got themselves in massive problems with 13 because they hadn't even decided what the battle system was going to look like, but they produced this pre-rendered cutscene, and then they were like, well, how the hell are we going to make that? Which is why that one took quite a while. So yeah, it's a couple of people saying that they're slightly worried. It's it's kind of just one of those things. I feel like as a fan, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I remember when Advent Children was coming out and they released so much information before that, there was no point in even watching the film anymore because they'd basically spoil everything around it. And we were kind of getting in that situation with Final Fantasy 15 as well, and they feel as though they need to share all the information about the game, and it doesn't really leave that much to the imagination when you're actually playing it. Legendary Winner. Now, that is a website, I will give you that, but I don't know if it's necessarily the most credible of sources. I'm not going to read it right now, but typically anything from the Daily Star, it's a newspaper. They don't know what they're talking about with gaming. They don't. The Daily Express spam out stuff about the Final Fantasy VII Remake every week, and it's never true. Bahamut Zero, do I think that Nomura will leave during development? I don't think he will. I mean, there was that whole thing a couple of maybe a month ago that where I think it was Game Reactor. They asked Tabata if he'd be happy to take over if Nomura stepped down from the directing the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I given what it means to Nomura, and also Kitase and Najima and all of the original staff who are working on the Final Fantasy VII Remake again, I think it would be something would seriously have to happen. Reaper TCM, are you talking to me or are you talking to someone else? But yeah, something would seriously have to happen for them to take people away from this project, because they even mentioned it when they were when the game was coming out, or when they announced it, that they didn't really want anyone else to be working on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They want to be the ones that would they want to be the ones that redo their own game. They wouldn't trust another generation to do it, because they didn't conceive the original idea. They don't know how it works, and as they said, they're getting older now, and this was kind of their last chance to make sure that they did the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But they did the Final Fantasy VII Remake in a way that they were comfortable with, and I think that's the important thing here. They want to feel comfortable with what they're producing. Now, obviously, they've got the mass expectation and the weight of the fans sitting on their shoulders as well. But I think there's a lot of weight on their shoulders in terms of making sure that they produce something that they're happy with. It's a huge risk for them, especially for Nomura, who's obviously working on Kingdom Hearts 3 as well. And Kitase kind of threw him in it because Nomura didn't necessarily want to direct the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And to be honest, that kind of worries me slightly, because Nomura was never intending to direct the game. It's a difficult situation, but yeah, I feel like because of the development shift during the middle of the year, that's kind of the reason why they've gone quiet. Because if you guys remember at the end of last year, and I think again towards the start of this year, Nomura did say that they wanted to show off something about the Final Fantasy VII Remake at a major trade show, obviously the three major trade shows are the E3, Gamescom, and TGS. There are more now that are cropping up. You've got obviously Paris Games Week. There's the PlayStation Experience, which could be considered a major event in Nomura's eyes. Jump Fest is quite small still, but there are more events that are cropping up that announcements can align to. But the Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's unlikely to be a massive news fest at the PlayStation Experience. It's probably going to be more in tune with what they did last time, if they do anything. So obviously in 2015, they did the extended gameplay trailer. They showed off the opening bombing mission for the first time. And we got to see some of the other characters. But, and there is obviously the chance that they will do that next week. I think it's next week. But if not, then, we've got to look at next year. And, then it's a case of when is the right time, because they don't really want to conflict with Kingdom Hearts 3. Kingdom Hearts 3 is obviously going to get a massive push. And I think, who was it? Oh, I think I know what you guys are talking about now in terms of the news. It was Yosuke Matsuda, the CEO. He said that we were going to be expecting some big news regarding release dates for top tier properties towards the start of next year. He didn't specifically say the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Some people jumped to conclusions with that. I think a safer jump to conclusion will be Kingdom Hearts 3, which obviously they've said is coming out next year, but they haven't given a specific release date. But there are many opportunities next year for them to start talking more about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. It will kind of depend, I feel, when Kingdom Hearts 3 releases. If Kingdom Hearts 3 releases towards the end of the year, then I can see them talking more about the Final Fantasy VII Remake towards the end of the year. If the Kingdom Hearts 3 releases earlier, I can see them hitting E3 pretty hard. But it's a difficult situation. I kind of, because they've been quiet so long, I kind of want them to stay quiet again unless they've actually got something consistent planned, because what they typically do with what Nomura typically does is that he will just release pockets of information, and we saw this with Versus 13, and we've seen it with Kingdom Hearts 3, that there isn't like a consistent plan in terms of the promotion. With Final Fantasy, once kind of Tabata took over Final Fantasy 15, there was more of a consistent approach. They decided that from E3 2015, that was going to be when like the promotional train started. And from there was a consistent plan. Obviously, Tabata kind of messed that plan up here and there by talking about things he shouldn't have done, and then they had to kind of do active time reports more quickly and talk about things they hadn't planned for. But there was still a kind of a 12-month, essentially a roadmap, or slightly longer than that, 15, 18-month roadmap from here's where we're going to start the promotional stuff for the game, and here's where we're going to release. Kingdom Hearts 3, that hasn't really started yet, which concerns me slightly in terms of the release date for that. And with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I feel as though if they're just going to release something at E3 next year to get the hype back up, and then we're not going to hear anything about it for another year, I feel like that would be a waste of effort. I'd rather they just kind of tone things down, and then once we're at the point where they have a release date in sight, at least internally, that they can start like a more of a consistent promotional tool for it. So they could do something at E3, and then a little bit at Gamescom, and then at TGS, and then towards the start of next year as well. Obviously, there's they can do their own events. They can do different things to help promote the game. But I feel it's with Nomura, he has a very different approach to Tabata in terms of the promotion of his games. I mean, it works to a degree. Kingdom Hearts 3, obviously, the trailer they released during E3, or not even during E3, it was kind of like outside of E3. That did amazingly well. It's one of the most viewed trailers during that period of time. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, look, based on the lack of information this year, the development change and everything, like, when do you guys actually feel as though the Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to release? I know that we've asked this question many times, but like it just has to change. Like, it changes all the time. I feel like 2019, 2020 are reasonable guesses for the first part. But then the question comes down to in terms of how are they actually going to maintain consistency between the different parts? I don't know, because by that point you've got to feel as though the next generation of consoles is going to be coming out at some point. Holomoko, Square Enix aren't listed for the PlayStation experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean they wouldn't show a trailer or some kind. Typically, those listings are related to like show floor, or if they've got demos or things that people can play. We've seen it with E3 all the time when it's the actual listing of providers is based on who's actually going to have a booth and that kind of stuff. PlayStation experience may be slightly different, but that just because they're not listed doesn't mean they may not show a trailer of some kind. 2026, that would be pretty extreme. Mike Jackson, the episodic thing came out around the time of the PlayStation experience in 2015. They mentioned it again in I think it was April 2016 when Katase did an interview with the Game Informer, but they haven't spoken about it since. I mean, to be honest, they've done literally no press since then at all. Nomura did some stuff obviously at the Monaco Anime Gaming International Conference, and they did some interviews following the 30th anniversary opening ceremony. And at that time, again, Katase did some stuff, and Hashimoto had been talking about the fact that Katase was going to be sharing information throughout the year when it was appropriate. Obviously, they haven't done that, and so it's kind of been a bit of a letdown from that perspective. It looks as though most of you guys are thinking 2019, 2020 though. I think that's a good shout though. Mackenzie Boggs, 2017. 2027. The 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. That's a great time to do it. Absolutely great time to do it. Maybe that's when the Final Fantasy VII remake will end. Also, someone asked, I don't know who it was, I'm sorry. Someone asked about whether or not there's going to be different directors for the different episodes or different parts of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'd like to... I mean, it would be cool. The way they've done the Final Fantasy 15 season pass, they've had different directors. Shida did 2 of them. Terada is doing episode Ignis, and I can't remember the name of the guys directed Comrades. But I don't feel as though they'll take that approach with Nomura. I don't think he's going to relinquish control unless the first part does abysmally, and Katase is like, hold on guys, I've got this, which I think is very unlikely on both counts. I think Nomura is going to keep control of it. But then again, it really depends what they ask him to do as a company, because we have no idea how long the Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to last in terms of literal dates. Square Enix may decide that he also needs to do some more Kingdom Hearts stuff, or maybe he's gonna fully relinquish control of Kingdom Hearts and give it to Tai Yasui. I don't know. That would be the dream, at least. Anyway, I also don't know about DLC. Sophie Eden has asked about the bonus packs for the different outfits. I don't know how DLC could necessarily work. Unless it's the gold source, that they could add some stuff into the DLC for that. In the battle arena, they could add more complicated battles. But I'd like to hope that Nomura... I guess we'll see what they do with Kingdom Hearts 3, because Nomura hasn't really been a big advocate of DLC. He's kind of more old school, Yoko Taro, where he doesn't... the DLC Yoko Taro adds is very... superficial, although I would say Drakengard 3 I think had some more story related DLC, but Nier Automata obviously didn't. Black Star Goat, when does episode Ingus come out? It comes out on the 13th of December, but I will preface that by saying that pretty much every single thing that Square Enix have announced relating to Final Fantasy 15 since E3 has been delayed at some point. So it's currently planned for the 13th of December. It may not come out on the 13th of December. We'll just have to wait and see. It's a slightly unfortunate situation, but I think it's from kind of racking my brain a bit. The whole never meeting a deadline is just a systematic. It's just a systematic failure of Tabata's BD2. It really is, because even going back, so obviously Final Fantasy 13 was delayed, Justice Monsters 5 was delayed, King's Knight was delayed, Monster of the Deep was delayed, Comrades was delayed. But then going back further, do you guys remember I did the whole video on the Type franchise? Obviously, Agito 13 was delayed. Not necessarily Tabata's fault. But then they were working on there was obviously Final Fantasy Agito, which was a mobile game, which was based on the original Agito 13. Then they were going to be porting that to the Vita, but that got delayed and then eventually cancelled. Anything else? Oh yeah, Type 0 Online was delayed. I think that's technically within BD2 as well. Pretty much, if Tabata announces a release date, there is, I'd say, a 50+% chance it's not going to be hit, for future reference. If Episode Ignis comes out on time, that then lowers down a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see. Queen Hitomi, I don't think they're going to put in some DLC to allow you to revive Aerith. That would kind of undermine that whole everything they were trying to go for there, but I guess we'll see. I guess we'll have to see. They could add a card game. I mean, there wasn't a card game in the original Final Fantasy VII, but that's not to say they can't add one in. They could even add in some traditional card games like Blackjack. Who knows? Who knows? Additional outfits for characters. Again, I don't feel as though Nomura would go for that, because it would kind of ruin the aesthetic that he's going for. I don't know. Hey, Puddle Jumper, look, I mean, come on. Tabby's the man. But you can't deny the facts. I would always go back to that, like the classic Miyamoto adage that everyone always throws around, that a delayed game has the potential to be better than a rushed game. And I'd like to think that the reason they delay games is because if they release them early, they wouldn't be as good. That's not to say that what they do release ends up being the best games of all time, but they're getting there. I'm personally, I'm just really curious to see what happens with this new IP. I know that's a massive segue away from the Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I am so ready for Tabata's new IP. And it's the only thing that really frustrates me about the Final Fantasy 15 2018 content, the fact that I feel as though the new IP has been hindered slightly because of it, but obviously we'll never know that. They've said that they've put things in place to make sure that doesn't happen, but who knows? Final Fantasy 15 wasn't technically delayed. That was delayed a significant amount of time. That was beyond delayed. It took 10 years. That was consistently delayed for a very long period of time. Very, very consistently. Who do you think the next character is that they're going to announce with the Final Fantasy VII Remake? My bet is for Tifa, because if we're going in story sequence context, then Tifa is the next main character that they would meet. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see. Who do you guys think it's going to be? Because obviously we've had Barrett so far, we've had Cloud, we've had Jesse, we've had Biggs, we've had Wedge. Technically, we've had Sephiroth because he was in that piece of key art that they did at the opening ceremony. So he's already been announced and revealed. Obviously not in game, but we have seen what he's going to look like roughly in game. Yeah, I think it's going to be Tifa. I'm really curious to see how they're going to change her, because I think like Cloud's design was, I think, somewhat surprising for a lot of people. He looked quite anemic, and obviously they said that was quite intentional. Barrett looked very similar, from what I remember, to kind of his Advent Children design. I really like the designs of Jesse and Biggs. Wedge, just I'm glad that they kind of kept in a bit of comedy with Wedge. But Teether is going to be really interesting to see how they kind of make her more realistic, I guess. But then I guess after Tifa, who's it going to be? I guess it would be Aerith if we're going along with story. I guess the difficulty they have is that they've got it's how much they're going to put on the non Final Fantasy audience, if that makes sense. Because obviously with the Final Fantasy VII remake, there's a large part of it that is going to be about appealing to the original fans and also fans who have come into the franchise since Final Fantasy VII came out. But there's also a big part of it where they're going to try and make the game appeal to those who aren't interested in Final Fantasy. And as we saw with Final Fantasy 15, there was a very big shift between the fans of the franchise who had played games prior to 15 and those who had come in with 15. The ones with 15 were really keen on the action-oriented gameplay, which of course the Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be featuring. And there's going to be so much hype around it. I feel like that's going to be a big marketing campaign for them. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. It's going to be very interesting to see how they do it. Why is Lauren's drawing cats? What are you doing, Lauren? Why are you drawing cats? It's going to be interesting to see as well, because we just covered in the Final Fantasy VII Remake facts video that the dating simulation was actually, well, it wasn't like the most complicated thing in the world, but it was actually like reasonably complicated. It's going to be interesting to see if they have a similar, or if they make it even more complicated in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. If they even have that mechanic in the game, they've said that they're going to try and retain as much as possible. But yes, Vicky, technically you do cross paths with Aerith before Tifa, but you don't know it's Aerith at that point. You don't know it's Aerith at that point. Resident Fantasy, I mean, it could be open world, but it really depends on what the first part's going to be. I think we've had many conversations about in terms of the speculation with regards to what the first part is going to be. If it's going to be purely Midgard based, then open world doesn't really make sense. But they could do open world for later parts of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. If it's going to be more kind of consistent with the original game, so that the first part is maybe up until, I don't know, like it could be up until Aerith's death, it could be until Junon, like there's many places that it could go. If it's up until Aerith's death, then obviously having a more open world would make sense. But again, it's going to be, I don't know, I guess they'd have to put in more systems for world travel if that's the case. Barbara Young, that's a bit too inappropriate. Oh, good moderating, Lauren. Good moderating. You're much better than I am. I wonder with the Honeybee Inn scenes whether or not they're actually going to whether they're going to go full whack on it, because obviously there's some scenes that you kind of you get the exposure to if you're just kind of going in it with tunnel vision, but there's also the other scenes that you see that like you can look through the keyholes and see President Shimmer doing his thing. Like I don't know whether or not they're going to go like full on with the Honeybee Inn. I mean, Nomura said that it's like a lot of the stuff's going to be sticking in. They're going to keep the cross-dressing in. I wonder if they're going to keep in the squat challenge. That's a very important part of that whole sequence. But it's I guess it's difficult to tell. And then like with the leaks and the rumors, I mean, I think we saw with the Final Fantasy 15 leaks and rumors that the chance of them being accurate are quite low. I mean, we don't really cover too many rumors on this channel because most of them are just they don't really make much sense, and there's no real credibility to them. I think we've covered 3, maybe 4 rumors on this channel, and I don't know if many of them have actually happened. No. But it's difficult to tell, obviously, because when the rumor comes out, you know, Square Enix may feel like they want to change something to make people believe that the rumors aren't true. It could be that the rumor or the leak talks about an original, like an earlier adaptation of something. For example, with the World of Versus rumor for Final Fantasy 15, it could be that actually 2018's content does relate to those topics in some shape or form. So technically, that rumor could be considered true. They are going to be doing episode Arden. We don't know obviously what's going to be dealt with in that, but it's definitely not going to be a standalone game. But that's not to say that at some point that it wasn't planned to be a standalone game. Tabata even said that he wanted to do a prequel around Arden. So, but then again, that could actually be what episode Arden is. That it doesn't actually take place during the main story. Like we don't know at this point. There's too many question marks right now. Too many question marks. The stuff I'm most interested to see relates to Red 13, because obviously there's the whole like the ship scene when they're traveling to June and they all have to dress up like sailors. How are they going to do that? How are they going to make that funny? I don't understand. I think that's going to be the thing that I'm most curious to see. Not necessarily how they keep the more controversial scenes in, it's how they keep that humor in there that was so prevalent throughout the earlier Final Fantasy games, where there was that they used the kind of the silly graphics and stuff to make it, they had just these comical moments in there. And like, yeah, the scene on the boat with Red 13 trying to walk around on 2 feet when he can't, like that kind of stuff is just golden. And I really don't know how they're going to do it now. I think that's probably what I'm most interested to see, like how they retain those things. And also, like, another one that we covered in the Cloud Origins video is the fact that after the Temple of the Ancients and Cloud giving the Black Material to Sephiroth, Cloud beats Aerith in the face. Like, are they gonna be like, people are talking about the cross-dressing scene and the Honeybee Inn, but you know, are they going to keep in the fact that Cloud punches Aerith in the face? Like, is that going to be okay? Like, is that something that people are going to be sensitive to these days? Like, there are so many parts of Final Fantasy VII that are up for debate in terms of like whether or not they're going to do it. And I think that's probably the thing that I'm most interested in, to see like what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Like all the dream sequences, how are they going to make those, like, I don't know, it's just... And also, I really cannot wait to see what the weapons look like in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. That, like, they looked pretty awesome in the olden days. They're going to look awesome these days. And then the other big question is Sapphire Weapon actually going to get some kind of part in this game, or is he just going to get his head blown off straight away again? Because if he is, that's going to be a real shame. I would love to see more Sapphire Weapon. Maybe they could make it into a boss. Are Emerald Weapon and Ruby Weapon even going to be made into like optional bosses? We don't know. It would be awesome if they would be. But yeah, that was a large thing. Oh, I must say as well, if you're enjoying this stream, which is just me talking, rambling, and trying to make something coherent, please do hit the like button. There's 161 of you in here, which is crazy. I think this is like the largest ever stream we've had. 162 now. Look at that. Yeah, like the stream if you're enjoying it. And how long have we going? 34 minutes so far. It's crazy. Is there anything outside of the Final Fantasy VII Remake that anyone wants to talk about? Because I'm an open book. We can talk about anything. Well, reasonably open. Which weapon am I most looking forward to? I feel like Sapphire Weapon always got a raw deal. Not only because everyone thought for a very long time that Sapphire Weapon was Emerald Weapon, and it was only like, I don't know, years after the game when people actually realised that no, Sapphire Weapon did just get his head blown off and then sink into the sea and disappear. and Emerald Weapon just doesn't really. Well, he kind of does have a head, but kind of not. But hey Andy Vid, Type 1. Oh wait, make a list here. Type 1, right? Type 1, and then I'll talk about Final Fantasy 11 Mobile. Everyone make a note of the questions you ask. I'm going to try and keep up with them. Okay, Type 1. I'm really bummed that they're not doing Type 1. I really enjoyed Type 0. It's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like a Nier situation where, like, I'm not saying that Type 0 is anywhere as good as Nier, in my opinion. Like, the story in Nier is just something else. The music is something else. But I feel as though, like, you know, Type 0, it was... I was gonna say it was the chance for Tabata to really make craft his own universe. It was kind of his, but obviously Nomura was still involved. And what was the guy's name? There was another guy, the art director, who was very very involved with it initially. And you know, obviously Type 0 came out. It did well in Japan. I think it sold 1 million copies on the PSP, which it outsold. Now Braden, if you're in here, will have debates with me about this. But in my opinion, it did outsell Final Fantasy 13 Part 2 in Japan, which, you know, is nuts. And obviously, we didn't get it in the West when we were supposed to have it. We got it in the West many years later. We got a port from a PSP version to the PlayStation 4. Like, that. Like, when does that ever happen? Like, I mean, it didn't make much sense. But they did a decent job with the port. But you have to remember that it was a PSP game. Like, it was designed with the PSP pacing in mind. It wasn't designed for a home console in any stretch of the imagination. They just released it on the PlayStation 4 as a promotional tool for Final Fantasy 15 to get episode Duskai out, etc, etc, etc. But I would have really loved to see a continuation of the Type franchise, given that home console love that they, like, Tabata's BD have now kind of opened themselves up to. And to be honest, it's kind of a shame. Like, I'm happy that Final Fantasy 15 did so well, but it's kind of a shame that Final Fantasy 15 did so well, because obviously, you know, Tabata's not interested in doing the Type franchise anymore. He's got larger visions. Like, he's now got the ability to do his own new IP with no interference from anyone else. Like, he doesn't, because it's not a Final Fantasy game, he doesn't have to consult with Nomura if he doesn't want to. Like, he's now got his own BD, so he doesn't have to talk with anyone else. He can just do whatever the hell he wants, which has been what he's basically working towards, I guess, over the last decade of him working at Square. So I can't begrudge him for that. But I would say I would much prefer that he let someone else in his team, like I mentioned in the lesser known directors video about Kenichi Shida, who directed episode Gladiolus and episode Prompto, and was like one of the key kind of projects managers on Final Fantasy 15. I would love it if he was given the opportunity to work on a Type game and to under Tabata's supervision, like he did with Final Fantasy Agato. Like, it was a mobile iPhone game that he let members of his team work on, where he just supervised. I don't know why he can't just do that now and just make Type 1 or Type Next or whatever it's going to be, and just ditch some of the other crap they're working on. Like, I would much prefer that they work on Type 1 than work on Monster of the Deep or the next VR game, if that's still going to happen. Like, to me, that just, it makes more sense. It's something that's more original. It's something that's more in tune with what we actually want as fans. Like, but, you know, obviously he can do whatever the hell he wants. What was the next question? So, Final Fantasy 11 Mobile. For those who are watching but weren't aware, I was a big Final Fantasy 11 player back in the day. I got into Final Fantasy 11 when it came out on launch day in Europe. I was actually playing it before launch day because I was a beta tester, so I was playing the American version before it came out in Europe. I played it for a good 2 to 3 years, did quite a lot of the end game stuff. I think I fell out of it probably six to 9 months after Treasures of Argon came out. But the Final Fantasy 11 mobile game really does seem interesting to me. If they can kind of recraft... Now, I know that Final Fantasy 11 is a very different game now to the game that I stopped playing. Like, they've had so many directors over the years, and since it has gone into Yoshida's business division, They changed the approach of Final Fantasy 11 a lot. They took away a lot of the old stuff in terms of like a lot of the timings that people needed and all that stuff, which makes sense because the player base is less now. So they couldn't have that, like the same party seeking stuff in there. They couldn't have the same reliance on other people to progress because there just weren't the people there to help you progress. So it would have just been like a dead place. And obviously they wanted to continue. But if they can do something to make that experience come onto a mobile phone feasibly, I genuinely don't know how they're going to, because like MMOs are notorious for the control systems that they have to implement and how quick you have to be with regards to like the higher the end game stuff. But I guess that's the challenge the Nexon are working with. And when I spoke to Yoshida, it was a couple of weeks ago now, I did ask him about the Final Fantasy 11 mobile game, and he did say that the thing that they're working on right now is the battle system, and that to me is the crux of it. Like they have to be able to get that battle system correct so that it works. And obviously, like if they're going to keep in parties and alliances and all those mechanics, then there are many question marks about the 11 mobile game. And to be honest, I don't think we're going to hear anything about it for a while. And, that was announced again a couple of years ago now, to the point where, when it does come out, how many people are going to be interested in it? But I guess it's just one of those things, isn't it? That there will be so many people that played the original Final Fantasy 11 that would be interested. Like I've seen a lot of people, I think it's actually, people have done it on their own, where they've just announced, I think it's World of Warcraft Classic, where it's basically the original game, but without all the bugs and crap, for people to go back and play it how it was. If they did the same thing for Final Fantasy 11, people would be interested in that. Like, the experience of the original Final Fantasy 11 is something that just... It was probably one of the worst experiences of my life, but at the time it was one of the best experiences. Like when you describe what Final Fantasy 11 was, people just think you're insane. But unless you experienced it and lived through it, there's such great memories from Final Fantasy 11 just because of everything it kind of brought out of you. Like it's not like I'm not trying to get all like self-help and everything here, but it was like a real, from an emotional perspective and like just life in general, there was a lot that went into that. The time commitment was just insane. That the requirements. At one point, I actually, because I was playing it when I was at university, or I generally played it when I wasn't at university in the off time, but I changed my entire sleeping habit to I was going to bed at midday and getting up at 7 p.m. I was waking up, having my dinner, and then basically leveling up with my party for about 15 hours straight, just so that I could try and get to level 75 as quickly as possible. And then with the story content, you could spend 4 or 5 hours waiting for some people to help you. But during those 4 to 5 hours, you could be doing so much other stuff. You could be like teleporting people around. You could be like just chatting with people, helping, like giving people advice, doing small mini things while you're waiting. But it's crazy. Like Final Fantasy 14 is such a different experience. Not that it's a bad thing. Final Fantasy 14's done amazingly well. And Final Fantasy 11, I think it's just one of those games where you're never going to see a game like that again, because it just doesn't. It just wouldn't work. Okay, next question. Is the studio going to have DLC? Young Philosopher. Yes, they have already announced that it's going to have DLC. There's going to be a season pass for it, which we've talked about before. The fact that we're not particularly happy about it, but I think it's just one of those things. It's unfortunate, but the beat 'em ups these days typically have season passes for extra characters. So it means that after launch, there's going to be 6 DLC characters, and you're probably going to be able to buy them independently. And I don't know if there's going to be free characters in between as well. I mean, it would be nice if there were. It looks as though they're going to be adding additional story content alongside of those DLC characters as well. Again, I don't know if there's going to be that additional story content is like they're going to be adding additional story content in for the non DLC characters after launch, but yeah, it's just one of those things. To be honest, I'm kind of disappointed about Dissidia NT because I was really hoping that they would use this opportunity to add in some new characters, but I mean the only new characters we've had really are Yoshtola, Ramza, Ace, and Noctis, and it just like the cast of characters is just so uninspiring in that way, because if you played the original Dissidia and you've played Duodecim, then yeah, sure, they've changed some of the moves around, and yeah, sure, it's on a home console, and that's kind of what people were asking for. But it would have been so much nicer to have some freshness in there. Like they could have done so much more with the other characters, and even some of the more modern characters, or some of they added Ramza in and they added Ace in. They were clearly open to adding characters from spin-offs and side stories. Why not add in some more unique characters to make the thing more interesting? Why just go back to the same characters we already had? It's a shame, but that's just where we're at. Any more questions? I feel like people have probably been asking tons of questions, but I was just so kind of focused in on answering the ones that I had that I probably ignored them. Sorry. Very sorry. Black Star Goat, could they add Kingdom Hearts characters into Dissidia? I think that it's a distinct possibility. They had been really keen to not cross over the worlds in the past, but obviously we saw Sora added into World of Final Fantasy so that they could promote the launch of Kingdom Hearts 2.8, I think it was. So I think that it would make perfect sense for them to adding Sora around in wanting to help promote Kingdom Hearts 3. I can see them doing that. They seem to be, but then again, we've also talked about the fact that there doesn't really seem to be much cohesion between the different games. Like, from a promotional perspective, why did they not announce Gabranth for Dissidia in the lead up to the Zodiac Age? That would have made perfect sense. Like, but they just decided to not do that. Like, there are always opportunities, and they sometimes hit them, they sometimes don't. Sometimes apparently they talk to each other internally, and sometimes they don't. Like, I guess it's if everything aligns, then they do it. Someone asked about materia. What was the question about materia? I'm guessing it was something to do with how I think it's going to work in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, some of the materia is going to be pretty straightforward. Like, you've got the HP pluses, the MP pluses. They'll just be pretty standard. I feel like it's more of like I guess magic. Maybe they'll have it so that you can only equip a certain amount of magic at a time, and then you can put short. Well, yeah, maybe that's how they do it. So you can equip a lot of materia, and then there's probably something where you can maybe pause and stuff. But it's probably gonna, like, think about how they did it in Final Fantasy 15. You could have lots of magic in your inventory, but you could only equip a certain amount at a time. Maybe they can have it so it's a shortcut system, so that if you've got fire on, you can cast fire. If you've got lightning, you can cast lightning. If you've got cure, you can cast cure. Like, basic things. Maybe they're going to have like a summon menu, but I don't know. They're going to have to think of a way to make it so that the materia can be used very quickly, because obviously it's a real-time combat system, and if they don't want you going through menus the whole time. To be honest, I feel like the HUD that we've seen is going to change. They already changed it from the original, like the PlayStation Experience trailer, to earlier this year when Nomura released the screenshots for the Guard Scorpion fight. Like, they've already changed the HUD. It's gonna, I guess we'll have to wait and see what they're gonna do. But I feel like they're gonna have it so that you can. It's gonna be a different system before. I don't think you're gonna be able to equip. Well, I mean, but if they're gonna go on a shortcut system, like, you may not be able to equip as many materia as you could do before. But then I guess we'll have to see. Maybe you could equip. Maybe they're gonna put it in groups so you can have certain types of materia. So, like, you can only equip a certain amount of spells. You can only equip a certain amount of command, or you can only equip a certain amount of the independence. I guess we'll have to Wait and see. Actually, yes, Young Philosopher. That does make sense. Ryu Hayabusa. I could see him being in Dissidia because obviously it's being developed by Team Ninja, and what's the guy's name? The producer of Ninja Gaiden is the producer. He's co-producer, I think, co-producer on Dissidia NT alongside not Hasegawa. Man, that's really gonna annoy me. He wears glasses. I can picture him in my mind. I know the guy. I've met him. This is bad. But yeah, Team Ninja are like the main guy from Ninja Gaiden, who like directs and produces Ninja Gaiden. He's working on Dissidia NT as well. So yeah, we could see some crossover characters from the Tecmo Koei games. Predominantly the Tecmo games, not the Koei games. How was Queen Hitomi? Where and how was Zack Fair soft confirmed for Dissidia? Did Square Enix say something about it? Did he appear in some trailers or something? Did they mention it in an interview? Or are we speculating? Are we speculating? Has anyone got the name? Yes. Hayashi. Yes. Is it Hayashi? No, let me see. I think that's the guy who I'm referring to. Yes, that is the guy. Thank you. Noct Tengu. Thank you very much for putting my mind at rest. Any more questions? Any more questions? Excuse me. Which interview Queen Hitomi? I need specifics. I know they'd like to do a lot of live streams with Dissidia, where they announce new stuff and new stages, and they do talk about updates to the arcade version. They said they'd like to add him in. Well, they said they say a lot of things about what they'd like to add. Who was it that said that? Who said that they would like to add him in? Because I feel like they've said that they'd like to add a lot of characters, and none of them have materialized. Airtails, yes, I do think they will introduce wider characters such as Genesis into the story of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I definitely think that Genesis will be making an appearance in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think that Cisne will also be appearing in the game. I don't know if they're going to be putting in like before Crisis characters. I feel like they're only going to be doing fan favorite characters. So yeah, like Cisne, Zack's going to probably have a bigger role to play in the game. We may see Vice and Nero, but I think that's really going to depend on how they want to expand the universe. But yeah, Genesis for sure. Genesis is really a love-hate character. There's some people who absolutely just adore Genesis and think he's the best thing ever. And there are also people that absolutely despise Genesis and everything he brought to the franchise. And I don't think there's any other character within the Final Fantasy VII compilation that splits people as much as Genesis. Because, like, he is kind of annoying, but also, like, he's pretty cool. But yeah, I think Cisne is also a good shout to be in the remake. Now we could also see, depending on like how they want to tell the story, they may put Angeal in it. They may put Hollander in there. We may also get Lazard in there. I feel like they may introduce some of the Dirge Cerberus characters in there, but I think if they're going to introduce any, then the one they would probably introduce would be Shalua. I feel like the Sviets, like Shulk, Vise, Azul, Rosso, I feel like because they're part of Deep Ground, like it wouldn't, unless they're going to dive into the story of Sector Zero, I don't think it would make much sense. Whereas Shalua from what I remember, she has backstory with Barrett. I think she's the person that put the gun on Barrett's arm and also Dine. So they could integrate Shalua in the story, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think it would be cool if they did, because I don't think many, like Dirge of Cerberus, obviously, it's a game that not too many people played in the context of Final Fantasy VII, but it was like a tenth of people played Dirge of Cerberus. So there are a lot of characters within that people just they're not aware of. But I would love to see some of the characters detailed more and integrated into the lore. What else have we got? Cami4242. I don't know. I mean, obviously, Yuffie and Vincent became really popular, despite the fact they were optional characters, and that was part of the charm, wasn't it? Like, because of like the age back then, and like people were, you could conceivably go through Final Fantasy VII and unlock neither of those characters. You probably would encounter Yuffie by accident, but not necessarily understand how to get her, because obviously you have to answer the questions correctly. Vincent, like, that's a much more complicated situation, because you've obviously got to get the safe combinations. You've got to beat lost number, and then you've got to go and have the right conversations down in the basement. But I feel like it's like, because they've said that they want to try and retain as much of the original's charm as possible, I feel like they may keep them as optional characters. It's just whether or not they choose to go down the same route, which I don't think they will, where, if you remember in Final Fantasy VII, Vincent and Yuffie weren't in most of the core cutscenes for the game because they're optional, and they didn't have the time to make like different branching cutscenes depending on who you had. With the 7 remake, I feel like there's going to be less of a reliance on FMVs. So if that's the case, they're using the kind of in-game engine for the cutscene rendering, then there is nothing to say that they couldn't do variations of cutscenes depending on who you've unlocked in your party. They did something similar, obviously, in Final Fantasy VII. Depending on who you had in your party, you'd get slightly different cutscenes play out using the in-game engine. So it's definitely a potential. What else do we have? What else do we have? Why are people so obsessed with Tifa in that way? Jens Krog Nielsen. Now, there's the potential for them to introduce new characters, but I think it's very unlikely. Nomura, I don't think has ever actually. I know Guitars has definitely said that they're only going to be looking to pull on characters from the compilation if it makes sense for them to do so. I don't think they're going to be introducing new characters. But having said that, if they do try to use characters from Before Crisis, Crisis Core, and Dirge of Cerberus, now, to be honest, a lot of them might feel like new characters to people. Because like Before Crisis, for example, it never released outside of Japan. Most people aren't aware of the story that happened in that game. So, if they did want to go into the past and they wanted to look into characters like Elfei, Fujito, Chelsea, who is Rude's girlfriend, like they could bring out a lot of these. There's also like the original members of the Turks. I think Veld is the leader of the Turks originally before Seng takes over. There's a lot of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII has hundreds of characters, but it just depends on how they want to play them in. Like there's even the novels where you've got like the detectives who kind of are doing stuff in the side. Like, there's lots of characters that they're probably going to have to fill out the world as well, because obviously in the original game, it was okay to be somewhat sparse. You didn't really expect to see too many people walking around, but they're going to have to make things like the Wall Market and Sector 5 seem more inhabited. Gyro, I think that they will do a better job of explaining Genova's origins. I think from what we've been seeing, especially from the series that Kotaku did, that a lot of the problems we had with Final Fantasy VII was just relating to the poor translation of the game. Like the Japanese version, it was quite clear. So it was only in the Western version where things got like lost in translation a little bit. So I feel like with the remake, they're going to do a much clearer job of explaining the history. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is actually explained in the scenes with Professor Gast and why am I blanking on Aerith's mom? It's not Elmira. What? Ifalna. There we go. Yeah, I feel like they'll probably expand that a lot more. We'll probably see more about Professor Gast and his relationship with Professor Hojo as well. I think there's lots of stuff that they can do to expand the story, but there's even tons of side characters in the original Final Fantasy VII that like people don't even remember. Like, how many of you guys remember like Holzoff? Like, there's so many other characters that they can also expand upon and have more about. But I think I've been going for an hour. That's crazy. There's still 167 of you guys watching. If you've enjoyed the stream, please feel free to hit that like button. It's absolutely crazy how many people have been in here. It's nuts, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed watching and listening to me ramble on about Final Fantasy VII, and you've enjoyed discussing all of the stuff in the chat with everyone else. I'm still optimistic about the Final Fantasy VII remake. I'm hopeful that they'll show something at the PlayStation Experience next week. If not, then I'm sure we're going to see something next year. Like, we have to. It will have been too long for them to have waited. But if we don't, then I think we just have to hope that they just are keeping quiet, and then they're going to do like a big launch, like a big media launch. But yeah, thank you all for joining. Thank you all ever so much for joining. Be sure to go and check out the video we posted up recently about the Final Fantasy 15 updates. There's been absolutely huge amounts of updates for the game. We didn't really cover it in the video, which is quite surprising because I thought people would want to talk about it. But obviously they've Episode Ignis is coming out 30th of December. They're adding loads of stuff into Episode Ignis. There's the additional ending, which they're saying is going to resonate with people who like the ending of the main game. There's a special fight they've added in for Episode Ignis. They are like basically changing the entire game by making it so you can play as any of the characters now, as opposed to just Noctis. They've announced Episode Arden is going to be the first piece of DLC next year. They said there's going to be at least 3 episodes next year. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Lauren, if you could put in the Patreon link, we passed 35,000 subscribers I think last week. I think we're almost halfway to 36,000 subscribers. So at some point this week, we're going to be doing a giveaway video. We've got some plushies to give away, and actually we've got quite a few plushies to give away. So be sure to support us on Patreon if you want to get in the giveaway. I think we'll also be doing a giveaway for non-Patreon supporters as well. And anything else we need to say? Yes, Discord. There's 150 people of you. There's 150 of you in here right now. If you want to have more consistent conversations about any of the updates or anything else that's happening, please join the Discord. It's basically like, I guess, a gamer's version of Skype, but it's all private. We've got different channels set up. So if you enjoy the mobile games like Mobius, Record Keeper, and Brave Extras, there's channels for you. You can find people to play Comrades with. There's general chats about life. We talk about Stranger Things and other things. So feel free to join the Discord. Announce yourself when you get in there. Tell everyone you've joined, and everyone's very welcoming. Lauren's stream of World of Final Fantasy will be back on Wednesday and Friday. We've got a video, the Patreon link for a forward, Lauren. Sort it out. We've got a video coming up tomorrow about Hashimoto and how he's saying stuff again and how we should be somewhat apprehensive about it. And we are going to be working on a massive mega video about how Final Fantasy battle systems have evolved over time, which I think you're going to find very, very interesting. And I've also started working on the next Origins video. I'm not going to say who it is yet, but once I've got more through it, I will. I don't know when that's going to come out. Hopefully it will be within the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be a significant one. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So thanks everyone for joining. Be optimistic about Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's going to happen at some point, I swear. Don't know when, but it's going to happen. And I will see you all soon. Bye.